event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has paid tribute at the Martyrs Sanctuary here in Algiers to the memory of the martyrs of the glorious War of National Liberation on the occasion of the commemoration of the 69th anniversary of the outbreak of the November 1st, 1954 revolution. The Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt has opened for the first time since the Zionist onslaught on Gaza launched on October 7. And Zionist forces have carried out airstrikes on the Jabalia refugee camp, causing hundreds of civilians casualties. Bolivia's government has declared the severing of its diplomatic ties with the Zionist occupation. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. Good afternoon. First, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has paid tribute at the Martyrs Sanctuary here in Algiers to the memory of the martyrs of the glorious War of National Liberation on the occasion of the commemoration of the 69th anniversary of the outbreak of the November 1st, 1954 revolution. President Tebboune laid a wreath of flowers in front of the commemorative stele and recited the Fatiha of the Holy Quran in memory of the martyrs of the revolution. The commemoration ceremony took place in the presence of senior state officials and members of the government. Later on, the President of the Republic inaugurated the Specialized Army Mother and Child Hospital in Bni Messous in the suburbs of Algiers on the occasion of the commemoration of the 69th anniversary of the outbreak of the glorious revolution of November 1st, 1954. The President of the Republic was accompanied during the inauguration ceremony by the Chief of Staff of the People's National Army, General Said Shingriha, and the Minister of Health, Mr. Abdelhak Sayhi. With a capacity of 278 beds, this new establishment specializing in maternal and child illnesses represents a modern model in compliance with international standards in force for the realization of this type of project. It is considered one of the quality achievements that comes to strengthen the medical and social care of the Army personnel and their right holders. The Algerian people celebrate today the 69th anniversary of the outbreak of the glorious November 1st, 1954 revolution. On this occasion, the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, had addressed a message to the Algerian people in which he said that the commemoration of the glorious November 1st revolution constantly reminds us of the weight of our responsibility and the sacred nature of the legacy we are entrusted with, and it is from this that we drew this strong will to achieve our strategic objectives, which we intend to make tangible on the ground. The details with our colleague Said Bouazi.
President Tebboune indicated in his message that these objectives will be achieved far from the blunders of defeatists, far from one-upmanship, and above all, far from the dizzying propaganda of the henchmen of the enemies of our beloved homeland, which is turning with determination and sure steps towards fulfillment, well-being and prosperity out of loyalty to the oath made to our martyr heroes. On this symbolic date, continued the President of the Republic, we recall with great pride the sacrifices made by the Algerian people during their armed struggle against colonial hegemony, whose doctrine was to rule our blessed land forever, before being annihilated by freedom-loving revolutionaries who embraced the jihad and on 1st November 1954 marked out the path taken by the valiant heroes towards victory or death as martyrs. Stressing the importance of remaining faithful to the sacrifices of these heroes, the President of the Republic affirmed that the new Algeria is determined to achieve the highest levels of socio-economic development through the mobilization of means and potentialities and combating passivity and inaction while freeing itself from bureaucratic obstacles and mentalities. President Tebboune also pointed out that the anniversary of this memorable date coincides with the serious obvious repercussions of the impenitence of the Zionist occupation in its barbaric aggression against the Palestinian people, underlining that Algeria has always stood by the Palestinian people in both word and deed, while reiterating its appeal to all regional and international parties to awaken the conscience of the international community and put an end to the barbaric strikes on children, women and the elderly. Algeria reaffirmed the constancy of its unchanging position, reflecting fidelity to our glorious history and to the message of the proclamation of November 1st, 1954, in favor of justice and support for the Palestinian people and their just cause, but also for unconditional solidarity with this people in these particular circumstances, added the President of the Republic. Algeria calls on all those who love freedom and justice and on people of goodwill to put an end to this crime against humanity committed by the Zionist occupier in full view of the whole world, he added.
Prime Minister Ayman bin Abdurrahman has said that the anniversary of November 1st, the date of the outbreak of the glorious War of National Liberation, is intended as a bulk way against any attempt to undermine Algeria's security and sovereignty. On this occasion, the Prime Minister recalled that November 1st is a memorable day and a glorious page in our history written in gold letters, thanks to the exploits of our mujahideen, or freedom fighters, and the sacrifices of our shuhada, or martyrs. This date is also to beacon that lights our way and that of all peoples aspiring to freedom. It is the bulk way that we have built to resist any attempt to undermine our security and sovereignty, he added. As the Algerian people and state, it is our duty on this day to pray God to grant His holy mercy to our valiant martyrs, without whom we would not be free. We must also implore the Almighty to protect our mujahideen, our living memory, thanks to whom we have become the masters of our destiny, said Ayman bin Abdurrahman. And a ceremony of the raising of the national colours has been organized at Maqam al-Shahid, or Monument of the Martyrs, here in Algeria, on the occasion of the celebration of the 69th anniversary of the glorious November Revolution. The details with our colleague Mariam Bershi.
The ceremony organized today as part of the celebration of the 69th anniversary of the glorious November Revolution under the slogan Revolution of Heroes and Men's Engagement took place in the presence of the Minister of Mujahideen, or War Veterans, Laid Rubiga, in addition to national personalities, mujahideens and executive from revolutionary organization, national institutions and the associated movement. Before raising the national colours, Laid Rubiga, along with government members, other officials and war veterans, visited the National Mujahid Museum, where the flagship steps of our rich national history were highlighted, notably the glorious Liberation Revolution. In a speech delivered on this occasion, the minister hailed the great interest granted by the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, to the memory of our brave martyrs, welcoming the stability, serenity, and the factors of development and prosperity that our country is witnessing under the leadership of President Tebboune. After reiterating the solidarity of the Algerian people with their Palestinian brothers, who are currently undergoing barbaric Zionist bombardments in Gaza, the minister underlined that Algeria's position regarding the Palestinian cause, as reiterated several times by the President of the Republic, reflects one of the aspects of our loyalty to our national history and to the values of the November 1st, 1954 Declaration.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has affirmed that the Algerian diplomacy will continue its efforts under the leadership of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, with a view to rehabilitating the Palestinian cause and confronting the double standards adopted in the treatment of that question. Commenting on the interventions of members of the National People's Assembly during an extraordinary session devoted to support for Palestine, Ahmed Attaf reaffirmed on this occasion the strength of the bonds of solidarity with the Palestinian people and the solidity of the Algerian position, which rejects, he said, any pressure, blackmail, or outbidding when it comes to this just cause. For Ahmed Attaf, Algeria has always been and will remain a supporter for the Palestinian cause and will spare no effort so that the Palestinian people can recover their stolen rights and establish their independent state with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. He said Algeria will continue, in accordance with the commitments of the President of the Republic, its steps aimed at mitigating the impact of the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in the Gaza Strip. The Speaker of the National People's Assembly, Brahim Boughali, has said in Algiers that the UN Security Council bears full historical and moral responsibility for the recurrent Zionist violations of the United Nations Charter and that it is time to put an end to the 75 years of abject occupation of the Palestinian territories and despoiling of the fundamental rights of the Palestinian people. In his speech at the opening of an extraordinary session of the National Assembly following the serious developments in occupied Palestine, held in the presence of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, Brahim Boughali condemned in the strongest terms the brutal Zionist aggression against the Palestinian people, calling for an immediate end to this barbaric war, which has undermined all human and civilizational values and risks undermining what little credibility the United Nations Security Council has left and the values it advocates. He described what is happening in Gaza as an appalling masquerade in the history of humanity, with the Palestinians being presented with the false choice of giving up their land or suffering genocide. At an extraordinary session of the National People's Assembly devoted to Palestine, chaired by the Speaker Brahim Boughali in the presence of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, the parliamentary groups of the National People's Assembly have hailed Algeria's unchanging position in support of the Palestinian cause in international fora, condemning the continuation of the barbaric Zionist aggression on Gaza in the face of the shameful international silence. To the ground now, where the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt has opened for the first time since October 7. More than 500 foreign nationals as well as dual citizens will be allowed to leave the enclave, the Gaza Borders and Crossing Authority said in a statement. The list of the people allowed to cross were published by the authority that called on them to head towards the crossing on Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. local time. According to earlier reports, dozens of injured Palestinians needing medical treatment in Egypt will also be allowed to leave the enclave. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has said that humanitarian aid deliveries to Gaza are completely inadequate amid deteriorating conditions within the Gaza Strip. In a statement, Antonio Guterres reiterated that humanitarian need in Gaza is far outpassing existing levels of assistance. Aid trucks have been trickling into Gaza from Egypt over the past week via Rafah, the main crossing that does not border the Zionist entity. Said Bougazi has more details.
Prior to the Zionist aggression, some 500 trucks carrying aid and other goods entered Gaza every day. The UN chief also voiced concern over military escalation as the Zionist occupation steps up ground raids in Gaza and continues to bombard the besieged territory. I am deeply alarmed by the intensification of the conflict between Israel and Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups in Gaza, Guterres said. The comments come as the relentless bombardments continue on Gaza, overwhelming hospitals that are inundated with the wounded and stressed to the breaking point by a siege that has severely restricted supplies of water, fuel and electricity. The Palestinian authorities have said that more than 8,500 people have been killed in Gaza, more than a third of them children, since the war erupted on October 7th. In a statement on Tuesday, United Nations Children's Fund UNICEF spokesperson James Elder said Gaza has become a graveyard for thousands of children. A spokesperson from the Palestinian Red Crescent Society called the situation absolutely horrific, adding that hospitals are already overwhelmed and they barely can deal with the increasing number of casualties they are dealing with every single hour.
Meanwhile, Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh today said that not calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Israeli war on Gaza is a green light for the Zionist entity to continue its aggression and genocide against the Palestinian people, underlining his total rejection of all attempts to forcefully displace the Palestinian people from their land. For his part, the Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed Abul-Ghait, has expressed his strong condemnation of the recent Zionist airstrikes that targeted the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza, resulting in hundreds of civilian casualties. In a press statement, Abul-Ghait said the world's conscience cannot remain silent in the face of the ongoing bloodshed. As for the Jordanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates, it has strongly condemned the recent Zionist massacre in the Jabalia refugee camp in the northern Gaza Strip, which resulted in hundreds of civilian deaths. The ministry also expressed its condemnation of the ongoing Zionist escalation in the occupied West Bank and the increasing acts of terrorism by Jewish settlers against Palestinian citizens. In his noon briefing, by spokesperson for the Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, said that he was alarmed by the intensification of the conflict, saying he was dismayed by reports that two-thirds of those who have been killed in Gaza are women and children. Let's listen to him.
The Secretary General is deeply alarmed by the intensification of the conflict between Israel and Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups in Gaza. Civilians have borne the brunt of the current fighting from the outset. Protection of civilians on both sides is paramount and must be respected at all times. The Secretary General condemns the killing of civilians in Gaza and is dismayed by reports that two-thirds of those who have been killed are women and children. The international humanitarian law establishes clear rules that cannot be ignored. It is not an a la carte menu and cannot be applied selectively. The level of humanitarian assistance that has been allowed into Gaza up to this point is completely inadequate and not commensurate with the needs of the people of Gaza, compounding a humanitarian tragedy. The Secretary General reiterates his call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and unimpeded humanitarian access to be granted consistently, safely, and to the scale in order to meet the urgent needs created by the catastrophe unfolding in Gaza.
And evoking the ongoing humanitarian operations carried out in Gaza, Stefan Dujarric said.
Just a bit more details about the humanitarian operations. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that yesterday a total of 26 trucks carrying water, food, and medical supplies entered Gaza through the Rafah crossing with Egypt. Since 21 October, 143 trucks with humanitarian aid have entered Gaza, and that is as of yesterday evening. Today, Martin Griffiths, the emergency relief coordinator, met Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtaya. He also talked by phone to families in Gaza and said what they have endured is beyond devastating, adding that misery is growing by the minute. After talking to an 8-year-old who told him he did not want to die, Mr. Griffiths said, "It's hard not to feel helpless."
That was the spokesperson for the Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric. And UN High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, Filippo Grandi, has called for unity of the UN Security Council to tackle refugee crises around the world. Jamal Silmani has more details.
Mr. Grandi told the Security Council in an annual briefing there are 114 million refugees and displaced people around the world.
Our latest figures speak of 114 million refugees and displaced people around the world. 114 million. This is surely a tangible, but sometimes neglected symptom of the world's current extreme disorder. Forced displacement is also a consequence of the failure to uphold peace and security, and brutal conflict continues to be its main driver.
The UN official said that in the past 3 weeks in Gaza were innocent civilians killed in unprecedented numbers, adding that a humanitarian ceasefire coupled with substantive delivery of humanitarian aid inside Gaza can at least stop this spiral of death.
The past 3 weeks have provided devastating proof that disregarding the basic rules of war, international humanitarian law, is increasingly becoming the norm and not the exception, with innocent civilians killed in unprecedented numbers. As we speak, and as you know, over 2 million Gazans, half of them children, are going through what my colleague Philippe Lazzarini has called hell on earth. A humanitarian ceasefire, coupled, of course, with substantive delivery of humanitarian aid inside Gaza, can at least stop this spiral of death, and I hope that you will overcome your divisions and exercise your authority in demanding one. The world is waiting for you to do so. But one must hope that a ceasefire becomes the first step towards embarking again and finally on the path towards a solution.
Grandi said the end of the Israeli occupation was the solution to peace in the region and in the world.
There will be no peace in the region and in the world without a just solution to the Israeli and Palestinian conflict, including the end of the Israeli occupation. I hope that the remarks by the Secretary General here in the Council last week will help everybody reflect on the need to turn this somber page, difficult as it may be, because it is vital. It is clear that this latest and deadliest round of violent conflict risks infecting the wider region and beyond with catastrophic consequences, including in places where UNHCR is very much present and working to help protect and assist the displaced and solve their plight.
He said the UN Agency for Palestine Refugees has been left chronically underfunded, adding that the World Food Programme, the UN Children's Fund, and the International Committee of the Red Cross all face the same financial crunch in their humanitarian activities.
And in his wrap-up of the Brazilian presidency of the Security Council, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Brazil and President of the Security Council for the month of October, Mr. Mauro Luis Lecker Vieira, recalled the emergency of a ceasefire for delivering humanitarian aid in Gaza.
Since 2016, no resolution is passed on the question of Palestine. As the human crisis unfolds before our eyes, this pattern in the Security Council must change. I repeat, there can be no rescue of hostages or humanitarian aid under shells. As I mentioned yesterday in the open debate on the matter, it is disheartening to watch the conflict claim lives of so many innocent people in the context of the current deadlock in the Security Council. The 10th emergency special session of the General Assembly, convened last Friday on the principle of uniting for peace, sent a strong message calling for a humanitarian truce leading to a cessation of hostilities.
And still in Latin America, Bolivia's government has declared the severing of its diplomatic ties with the Zionist occupation. The Bolivian Foreign Ministry said the move comes in protest against the Zionist crimes against humanity and in its attack on the Gaza Strip. In 2009, Bolivia cut its diplomatic ties with Zionist entity in protest against its attacks on the Gaza Strip before resuming ties in 2020. Neighbors Colombia and Chile also recalled their ambassadors for consultations condemning the deaths of civilians in Gaza and calling for a ceasefire. And now back to Algeria, where on the occasion of African Youth Day celebrated on November 1st, the National Association of Exchanges between Youth in its capacity as member of the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations and vice chairman of the African Parliament of Civil Society, has organized a sit-in in solidarity with the Palestinian people in their struggle and resistance against the increased aggression by the Zionist entity in the occupied Palestinian territories, notably in the Gaza Strip, according to a press release by the organization. During the sit-in, which was attended by African students of different nationalities from across the continent, the youth people called on the United Nations to act responsibly and consistently in accordance with the UN Charter on Decolonization with a view to putting an end to the Zionist aggression, occupation and crimes in Palestine, adding that the Zionist entity is flouting all international customs and laws in full view of the international community by inhuman and immoral practices. With this, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for a reminder of the headlines. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has paid tribute at the Martyrs' Sanctuary here in Algiers to the memory of the martyrs of the glorious War of National Liberation on the occasion of the commemoration of the 69th anniversary of the outbreak of the November 1st, 1954 revolution. The Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt has opened for the first time since the Zionist onslaught on Gaza launched on October 7. And Zionist forces have carried out airstrikes on the Jabalia refugee camp, causing hundreds of civilian casualties. Bolivia's government has declared the severing of its diplomatic ties with the Zionist occupation. That's the end of the news bulletin for today. Time now for a special program devoted to the celebration of the 69th anniversary of the commemoration of the Revolution of the 1st of November 1954. With this, we come to the end of it. We'll meet again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Thank you.
بلادي بلادي الأمان الأمان.
The lofty Algerian revolution wrenched independence from colonial France.
بلادي بلادي الأمان الأمان. أغني علاك بأي لسان.
Algeria won independence from France in 1962 after a bitter revolutionary war that cost more than 1.5 million glorious Algerian martyrs.
جلالك تقصر عنه اللغة ويعجزني فيك السحر البيان.
The French troops had invaded the country in 1830 from the locality of Sidi Frej on the western coast of the capital Algiers.
أول بلد استعمر هو الجزائر وآخر بلد تخلص من الاستعمار هو الجزائر. فجمال الجزائر أغرى حتى المستعمرين فلم يريدوا الخروج منه ولم يريدوا أن ينسوا ما ذاقوا به من نعم.
By the time the colonial occupation was complete, Algeria's population had dropped from 6 million to about 3.5 million, a colonial genocide caused by mass killings, endemic disease, and utter poverty. Soon the country's most fertile lands were seized by colonial settlers, mostly for wine production. In 132 years of harsh French colonial rule, settlers developed a luxury lifestyle, and a stream of high-grade products went back to metropolitan France.
وهام بك الناس حتى الطغاة وما احترموا فيك حتى الزمانة وأغريت مستعمريك فراحوا يهيمون في الشرق بالصولجان.
That colonialism was a sheer disaster for the Algerian people. For example, in 1950, the literacy rate stood at 10% among the oppressed Algerian population. In 1830, it had been over 40%.
ولم يبرحوا الأرض لما استقلت شعوب ولم تستكن للهوان.
The National Liberation Front, FLN, started in 1954 as a small minority in the national movement that was committed to armed confrontation with colonial France.
وزلزلت الأرض زلزالها وضج لغاصبك النيران.
But the devastating violence of the French response to its early actions built popular support. Soon it became the dominant nationalist organization. Internal debates about how it was fighting for and how to win came to a head at the organization's Soumam Congress held in August 1956. It established a militant agenda calling for a social republic after Algeria's accession to independence, with serious social and economic reforms.
إليك صلاتي وأزكى سلامي بلادي 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 الأمان الأمان. لتعيش حرا طول الزمن وطني 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 طال الثمن طال الثمن روحي مالي نفسي بدني روحي مالي نفسي بدني.
And he determined to take the liberation fight to the country's cities and towns. It was now that a Battle of Algiers began, employing both hit-and-run attacks against French colonial targets and worker strikes in the capital, where many Algerians lived crammed into the packed alleyways of the Kasbah. An 8-day strike paralyzed the city in January 1957, but was partially broken by brutal repression meted out by the French colonial army. The colonial war machine beefed up the heinous repression in March 1957, and numerous nationalist leaders were hunted down, savagely murdered, and forced into exile. But the brutality of the colonial repression won increased support for the Algerian Mujahideen, or freedom fighters. The armed revolution against colonial occupation pulled in and involved wider layers of Algerian society. Men and women were forced to re-examine their relationships. The post-independent government estimated that over 12,000 Algerian women had actively participated in the struggle for national liberation, with about 3% of these brave women fighting in combat.
استعمار في بلادنا